It looks like this is going to be a series of videos about making piece molds with plaster. I think it's a great way to start if you haven't ever made molds before, because it's relatively easy, it's inexpensive, and you can learn a lot by making a few plaster piece molds. I'm Diane van der Zanden. This is Atelier Arenas in Colima, Mexico. And if you've already watched some of my videos, you know that I developed a new method for working with paper mache in plaster molds to make lightweight, durable, hollow paper sculptures. So what I'm going to talk about in this video and show you is the two-piece plaster mold that I'm making of the skirt for a piece that's in this series of sculptures. Here we go. In the clip, you can see the already made paper torso that's on top. Then I'll go about making a base for the skirt to lie down on so that I can make the mold bed out of plasticine. I'm going to make a wooden base to lie the skirt down so that I can make a mold bed to separate the skirt into two parts so that I can take the plaster off the top and off the bottom at the end. You can use water-based clay if you want, if that's what you have and that's what you like. I like to work with plasticine because it sometimes happens that a few days go by and I don't have a chance to work. So the plasticine is oil-based and it doesn't dry out. I put the plasticine here in the sun, makes it easier to use to make molds. This plasticine is soft and I use this just for mold walls and mold wells. So I'm building up the base a little bit around the sculpture with wood so that I don't have to take too much time or too much plasticine to build up this first part of the plasticine wall. And I'm guessing that my traditional sculpture teachers wouldn't really like the way that I work, but I really like to cut the sculptures apart and put the pieces in the mold before they're done, before they're smooth, and work on them as I'm making the mold. There's a plaster mold making area here outside of my studio. I make sure that I get everything out and it's all right here handy, because once I start mixing plaster and using the plaster, I don't have time for anything else. It has to be cleaned up right away while it's still wet, otherwise it sticks to everything, including your drain pipes. So don't clean it in the sink and don't wash it down the drain. I'm using the Michelangelo method of mixing plaster, which means that you use a bucket and don't fill that bucket more than halfway up with water. And then you start putting in the dry plaster slowly. So you basically fill with plaster until there's a dry hill on top of this water. Then you wait for 2 to 4 minutes until the water gradually goes up into that dry plaster and you have no more dry plaster. Usually I put my hand into that plaster without introducing bubbles and kind of slowly mix the plaster, and I can feel whether there are chunks of plaster in there. I can feel when the plaster mix is smooth and ready to pour into the mold. I also really like to make mold wells so that I don't have to build plaster. It's very easy to build layers of plaster, and usually it sticks to itself, but I have a much easier time when I make a well around a piece that I want to make the mold of. Then I can just pour that plaster in, and I just make sure that everything is completely sealed all the way around, because when the plaster is liquid at the beginning, it's very liquid and it really wants to flow out through the sides of the mold. And you don't want that. I put in some of the plaster and then I brush and brush so that any bubbles that are attached to any piece of the mold bed of the plasticine is here and the sculpture is here. The bubbles like to get right in there and stay. And so I brush all around that part, and having a mold well allows me the time to get into there before the plaster starts to cure. This is a pila, which is very common in Mexico. Pila literally means a pile, but it also means a battery. So this is a storage tank for water, and it's also a wonderful utility sink. The crickets have decided that they have to be chirping right now. I'm sure that I've missed something. I'm sure that there's something else that you want to know when you're doing this. And stay tuned for the next one, which is going to be part 2, making part 2 of this skirt mold. Definitely leave me comments. I'm answering all the comments that I'm getting right now, and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe. Thanks. I really appreciate you.